What is up, everybody? We're here with another special edition of the Jack Rabbit Illustrated podcast. Before we get too far, I'm hearing a lot of
Where's that
feedback.
coming from?
Is
that you,
Is it
Tanner?
on? Maybe
Is
turn
that
down your
me?
speakers.
Let me do so.
It's weird because we didn't have it pre-show, but
How about that?
Let me try now. Yeah, I think we're good. Sorry about that, everybody. Just wanted to make sure the audio quality is good. Don't want to pull a Dallas and go through most of the show with bad audio.
I heard about that after the fact too.
I had to take a shot at Dallas because I know he's listening. But very happy to have Tanner Castora on here to talk some Jackrabbit football in the offseason. Plenty has gone on since the national championship. But I guess, Tanner, first of all, thank you for being on, number one. Let everybody know what you got going on these days.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me on. So right now, my big project, and it's been my project since last August, I'm writing what I guess I'd like it to be the book of South Dakota State football. It's really a biography on Coach Stig, but it's more of the program's book, and he's just the main character. And so that's what I'm working on pretty much every single day. I was working on that just before coming on this podcast. So that right now is my main focus in my life. I do some stories on the side here and there, but that right now is what I'm putting most of my time into.
That is really cool. So you plan on like publishing that in like paper form and everything?
Yeah, it'll be published. I'd like to have it out. I'd say probably it'll be a few more months. It'll probably be sometime after the football season, but yeah, it'll be a published book, and I think it'll be something that the people of South Dakota State really appreciate, and I think it's something that it's a story that's worth telling without question.
So we'll be able to get signed copies, right?
Of course, yes.
Appreciate that. No, I think you're right. I think that it's a very cool story, and I think anybody that's been a part of it over the years will be very interested to read it. And I think new fans too that are just kind of now getting into Jackrabbit football, I think they'll appreciate reading the history. So I love that you're doing that, and I'm excited to see what comes out from it.
Appreciate that. It is a cool story. It's so fascinating to learn from someone who's an outsider where the program was to what it's become today. It's night and day from the growth that they've made, and it's an honor to be able to tell a lot of the stories and story that is still continuing.
That is really cool. So I do have to ask, one of our podcasters, Alex, asked a question that pertains to what you're talking about here. And I don't want you to give away too much from your book, but what is one thing that the average fan doesn't know about the program but should?
Ooh, that is a good question. Something that the average fan does not know about South Dakota State, but they should.
Yeah, like a interesting tidbit from history or something that you found.
There's a couple things that come to mind, and it's things that Stig implemented that were a part of the every year program as they went into the season. I'll leave it on kind of a cliffhanger. There is something that is quite interesting that has to do with national parks. There's a correlation with the way that he addressed the team and the character of the team, that what he wanted to see in the young men that he was coaching. It has to do with national parks, and I'll leave it at that.
Will we actually see a list of all the Stigisms, the rules that he always brought out on the coaches show? Like, that would be pretty cool. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Oh, I am. I'm planning on talking to people like you guys to understand and hear more, because like the more I hear about, do you remember when he said this and that, and then I can dive into those points as well. So I've heard most of them, but the more players I talk to, fans, and I hear things, then I can ask Stig about that, and then that triggers memories within his mind. And so yeah, I do know some of them. I'm getting to know more of them, and some of them are off the wall. And I ask him, I go, how did you think of that? And he goes, just how my brain works. Just how my brain works sometimes. So it is quite fascinating.
He is definitely an interesting man. Yeah, I think every Jackrabbit football fan is going to be looking forward to that coming out. Um, so before we talk about stuff that's happened since the national championship, let's talk about that. What was your national championship experience? How did that go for you? Any notes from that?
You talking about the game this past season?
Yep.
And the events leading up to it and after
Yeah.
and so forth. Yeah.
I thought it was a great day again, and I'm talking like weather-wise. That's what stood out to me. 2 straight years of beautiful weather, and it made me think about how it's going to change because you guys might know this. Am I wrong? Is it going to Monday night this coming season?
Correct. Yep.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's the last time that the game will be played under the sunshine, and now it'll be cool. It'll be under the under the lights. So I remember looking back and thinking that it was a beautiful day, and I actually recall thinking for a second, does Montana have a chance in this game? And I felt like they did after that punt that went off. I
Yep.
think it was the foot of Matt Durant, if I'm remembering correctly. And then from there, South Dakota State kind of figured it out. And now looking back months later, I mean, I'll say this. There's a quote that Stig had said. Actually, Lori, his wife, had told me, and it was after the years of Goddard and a lot of great players on the offensive side of the ball, and they had all graduated and they left. And Lori said, John looked at her one night and said, I don't know if we'll ever have a team like this again. And well, they certainly did, and then some. And it kind of makes me think like that myself. Man, will South Dakota State ever have a team like that again? We'll see. But you look at how many of those guys, I think it's 8 of them right now, are on NFL rosters that played in that game. It is so impressive, that roster that they put together. And that's exactly what they set out to do. They wanted to go 15-0. They wanted to repeat. And it does feel different moving into this season than last season. There was a ton of anticipation for last year, but I almost want to say it feels like there might be a bit more this season because there is some mystery to what we're going to see. There's going to be some new faces and new players that will have to emerge. And last year we knew exactly who they were. It was just, can they continue to take a step up? And they did. But that national championship was awesome. And to see it done in Frisco again with the sea of blue, one of the things that stood out to me personally was seeing Coach Stig on the sidelines. We just happened to be next to each other at one point. And I talked to him a lot as it is, obviously. So I don't want to be taking too much of his time when he's, around other people. But I remember looking at him and wondering, I wonder what he's really thinking right now. He was just taking it all in. And what an interesting dynamic it was. He knew all these guys. I mean, this was literally his team, in a sense. Like he had recruited all of these guys. And then one of his former players that he loves has taken over and is now coaching them. You talk about like a proud grandfather. That had to be a feeling that I'm sure few of us will ever experience, because not only did he build such a powerhouse, but almost no one in sports sails off into the sunset the way he did. And to be able to return the next season right back at the same place where it all commenced just a year before, it was cool to see him standing on that sidelines. And it was cool for the program again to go back to back. And now they're trying to go into territory that few have ever gone in and win 3 in a row.
For sure. I mean, I think we'll get into this upcoming season in a little bit, but one of the interesting things, you talk about the program that he built and all the players that were amazing on that team. It's wild. All those players they're going to be gone, and all the coach turnover, and just kind of trying to figure out what's going to happen with that. And I don't know if you saw, I think there's one coach remaining from from the
time that Mark Gronowski got on campus.
Yeah.
Yep.
The only coach on staff is Jimmy Rogers.
Yeah.
Still on staff. Yes.
Which is wild. And so, yeah, there's a ton of intrigue in this season coming up. And, let alone the fact that, they'll be looking to go for the 3-peat, but yeah, super exciting that way. Any other notes on the championship before we move on?
Not that I can think of. I do remember. What did you guys think as far as how it felt afterwards compared to the year before?
It was weird. It felt like the year before, it felt like, man, we finally did
Finally.
it. There was so
Yep.
much like relief and emotion. This year, it felt like a victory lap.
Mhm.
It was like, well, we got all the horses back. We're going to run through everybody again. And it was an odd feeling the whole year because of that,
Yeah.
because it was like there was never really a worry or a doubt. Oh, I did have to mention, you mentioned at one point you thought that Montana could get back into the game. Just ask Clifton McDowell if he hadn't got
Beat me
injured.
to it. I was going to ask if he saw that tweet.
I did. I didn't.
That's a wild
I
take.
don't. Why would you tweet that?
I don't know.
You believe in yourself a lot, I guess.
Yeah, but that's not even the point. Like I appreciate him having that belief, but you played the game and you lost, and it wasn't really that close, and you scored 3 points. It's I don't know. I saw that tweet, and I've never met Malik, or I'm sorry, Clifton McDowell, but I didn't think that was going to do him no good saying that publicly.
The timing of it's extremely strange, and the fact that it came so late. Like,
right.
I mean, that's out of people's minds at this point. We're looking forward to next season, and like if it would have been the day after the game, I guess I would have understood it a little bit more. But
even to say that if it's like a one possession game, it's like that wasn't the case though. It was not the case. They hardly got the ball into scoring position in the second half. They were outmatched, but you know.
It's a lot different than the argument that if we had Mark Gronowski the first time that we went, we possibly could have had another ring. I mean, I think arguably we would, and if he wasn't hurt the next year, potentially then as well. Although Oladokun was good.
Right, and whether, let's say Mark believes that, I don't think he's going to be tweeting that out.
Exactly.
No, he's smarter. No, I didn't mean to say it that way, but yeah.
Is my audio good, by the way, guys?
Oh, yeah, you're good. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. No problem. Well, moving on from the championship, we get into the off season. We get into some NFL draft talk, and you had a chance to be a part of the Yankees experience, which was really cool to have that behind the scenes experience. If somebody hasn't checked out that article, please do that. Very well written, very cool behind the scenes look at it. Kevin, thanks. Just come from a couple meetings here, so didn't need a tie though. But we got a classy guest on. I had to class it up. But no, yeah. So tell us a little bit about that experience with the Yankees and what that was like.
Well, I appreciate you mentioning the article and complimenting it. I've become good friends with the Yankees. They're probably two of my best friends. And so it was an event for friends and family. And to be honest with you, I went to it and I didn't really have too much of a plan to write any story. I was just there for the boys. And as things unfolded, I was like, this is unbelievable. And so, it kind of worked out where I wrote this story. It was so cool for me to be able to see the workings behind the scenes of how that really unfolds, because you hear all the time, this guy signed with him and he's going here, but to actually see it happening live in person was so cool. They're getting phone calls and they're saying this and that, and it's a moving process. And so something that this is, and I'll get to this point, a really almost odd thing that I thought was weird, and it's such a 2024 thing. But anyways, so people should read the story and there's more detail in it. But Jaden was told, this is about the 5th or 6th round, that, look, his agent calls Jaden and says, hey, the Houston Texans want to sign you. And if any other team calls you and is interested in you, you're supposed to tell them that they have to draft you if they want you, because we're signing with Houston. So the draft ends and neither of the twins get drafted, and Jaden's going to sign with Houston. Well, then it became a question of where would Jackson go? And some things transpired, and it looked like it was going to be Houston. And so the family gathers together outside, and it's kind of dramatic because everyone back in the bar, 60, 70 people, we don't know what's going on. It's just the family out there talking, and they're deciding what to do. And there's things happening. Well, Jackson decides to sign with Houston alongside Jaden. And this is the part that this is just bizarre. Mrs. Yonke told me this afterwards. Before the boys even came back in the bar and announced to everyone they would be signing with Houston, someone drove by in the car, honked, and said, "Hey, congrats on going to Houston." So, yeah, somehow there was a reporter is plugged in with the team and had tweeted that out the second that I don't know how that was crazy to me. But anyways, so the boys come in and they announce that they're going to Houston together. And I remember people were initially like wondering, oh wow, they're going to be competing together, and there's a lot that goes into the story that you can wonder about their decision. I think it's a great decision. I really do. And here's why. 2 reasons. If you've ever moved away somewhere far from home, it is such a good feeling to have someone by your side who's a friend. That's just the human part of it. I mean, let's say you, Ben, you got your suit and your tie on. We're going to ship you out tomorrow to Seattle. You're going into a whole new organization, brand new people. You don't know anyone. That's intimidating, let alone the NFL. I mean, that is, you're asked to perform. They got to go there and perform. It's not just getting to know each other. They got to go there and perform. So to have someone by your side who you can confide in, you can experience it together. Not even just that, you can study the playbook together. Jackson was showing me the other day, they got their first installment. It was like 72 plays. Their first installment. Now they can study together. They went golfing together this past week, and they can do things together, so they have each other. So that's one thing that is a big bonus. But here's the second part. I think people know this, but I don't know if people understand to what degree this is. It's almost too much sometimes. Those two are so competitive with each other. Sometimes there's just no peace between them because they're always trying to one-up each other. And that will push them. Their dad talked about that to me, how that will push them. Because let's just say, and I really mean this, I think both of those guys have a chance to make the team. I really do. It's an outside chance, but that is a possibility. Let's just say one of them makes the Houston roster and the other one doesn't. Well, that other one who doesn't make the roster will be incredibly motivated to find another team to join because his brother's on the NFL. You're telling me that the other one's going to sit at home? That's not going to happen, at least for a little bit. So they'll be motivated. And every day at practice, I mean, they play the same position. So when this happened at South Dakota State, when one of them makes a great catch, the other one's trying to do the same thing. And it's just how their dynamic works. So I actually think it was a great decision. I know they're competing for a wide receiver spot, but I just think that's them. That works for them. And we'll see as time goes on. Another piece in the article is how Houston, unlike 30 of the other NFL teams, has 4 preseason games. Most teams only have 3. And what that means, they can see more film. More film is out there for other teams to see if one of them is to get cut. And that's big coming from a small school because you don't have the film week in and week out against NFL players. So that is another big deal, and that was a factor in their decision as well. But I think those two are in a good position, and I truly think it was a great decision.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think you can debate whether it's a good decision or not, but I appreciate the insight and the it's really interesting hearing you lay out all the reasons why it can work. With them being such competitors, I have wondered, did they ever talk about what it was like early at SDSU when Jackson was on the field getting reps before Jaden? And I mean, it turned out to the point where, Jaden was getting the same amount of reps and they were, kind of neck and neck as far as, talent level. But what have they ever talked about what that was like early?
Yeah. I mean, going back even before Jackson was playing more than Jaden actually scored the first touchdown between the two. It was a blocked punt that he recovered in the end zone. Jackson watched that back at home on the TV, and he was ticked off. he was actually a little upset that his brother had scored. Now, obviously, they do love each other. There's no question they love each other, but that's kind of the dynamics of the relationship. And then when Jackson was playing and Jaden wasn't, Jaden was upset. And then you look how it all plays out, and their numbers are almost identical over their 6-year career. It's ridiculous. It's uncanny. It's just uncanny across the board. So yeah, they've told me about that many times. And look, I mean, I get it. Like I have a younger brother. We're not the same age, but there's competition there. But this is just different when you are clones. I almost call them clones, and they play the exact same position. You play at the same exact school. They both play guitar. They're both really good guitar players. They both can juggle. They both golf all the time. I mean, if one of them does it, the other wants to too. And so yeah, it bothered them. It legitimately bothered them when the other one was succeeding before Jaden or Jackson was themselves.
I think it's really cool you say how they have all these advantages, but the thing that comes to mind is having an accountability partner. And you know, you can use that in many ways. And I was thinking right away, hitting the weights, like, I mean, you got someone there to push you, and it's pretty cool. It really is
very cool. I'm excited to see what happens between those two as far as their careers. And another thing too, that I'm telling you, I'm not missing this game. Their first preseason game, if they are still to be in the team, fingers crossed that they are, they're playing in the Hall of Fame game, and that's played in Canton, Ohio. That's about 50 minutes from my hometown in Cleveland. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'll find a way to be at that game.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. You know, their story so far has been so wild. Like, you know, you talked about how their stats are about the same, going to the same team. I mean, it just would be absolutely wild if they both actually make the same, like the active roster for the same team. It just seems like it's impossible. Like it's just too good to be true. But I mean, it's possible. You know, I don't know.
It is possible. I think what's maybe more likely is one makes the roster and another makes the practice roster.
Right. Yeah,
that's definitely a possibility. But hey, I mean, those guys have been proving people wrong from the start of their South Dakota State careers. There were people who did not expect them to become what they were. Even Coach Stig, he's told me they thought about and they wanted to move them to linebacker. They didn't know that they could play wide receiver. Well, they certainly could. And you know, they've been on the same team, the same sports team, any sport, basketball, football, baseball, track. They've been on the same team since they were 5 years old, and now they're playing for an NFL team together. So their story continues, and their stories have been intertwined their entire lives.
What'd you hear as the largest knock against them? Would you say is it route tree, route running, speed? I mean, blocking. They're amazing at blocking, right? So
I haven't. I'll be honest with you. Maybe because I'm asking the scouts the wrong questions. I haven't heard any knocks. I never asked the scouts what they need to improve on, which maybe I should have. Maybe I should have done it now that you say that. But I always ask them how they compare the two and what they see in the two, what the differences are. And one thing that was interesting that I put in the article were the coaching staff for Houston liked Jaden better, but the scouts liked Jackson better. And that's kind of been how it's worked. Jackson was more highly regarded coming out of high school than Jaden was. And I actually asked one of their brothers that. I said, well, why is that? And they said, well, Jackson just, I guess, has a slightly bigger build, which maybe was true back in the day. I don't know so much anymore. They look almost identical as far as the way that their physique is. But I don't know. For whatever reason, Jackson has been the more highly regarded kid. And I think that actually would have been the case if they didn't play their 6th year. Jackson was looked at as a better prospect coming into last season, but then Jaden had a better year. Jackson's listening to this. I'm just keeping it real. Jaden outplayed you this past year. Jackson had a good year as well, but Jaden really played himself into an NFL wide receiver. And so I don't know. I think the only knock from my own eyes would say is they don't have top-end speed. They have good speed. They don't have great speed. Yeah. But you mentioned it, Chad. They're great blockers. They're very good route runners. And I'll tell you what, right now, Houston is playing Jaden in the slot. That's a big slot receiver, but that just shows you how well he can move in close spaces. So we'll see what happens. But No, I actually have never asked scouts what they need to improve upon, but I could get that done in the future for you.
Hey,
Have they?
one
Have
other
they,
dumb. Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Chad.
One other dumb question. How do you tell them apart?
I'm telling you, you can ask them this. I've never confused them. There's something that's slightly different, and I've got it right every single time. I think
Wow.
for the person who doesn't maybe see them as often as I do, it could be confusing. No question. They cut their hair the same way, and usually they cut their own hair, which is crazy. I don't know if I would trust my brother to cut my hair, but I don't know. I just they look slightly different to
Are
me, and
you
I have
sure?
no
Maybe they're
problem.
just not telling you when you got it wrong.
Yeah,
That
it could be.
That could be. I will say this, though. I will say this. Jackson's not going to like this one because I did hear he won down in Houston, but Jaden is a slightly better golfer. I can confirm that.
Mm.
I like it. I was gonna ask, has any scout or whoever you've talked to, have they given you like a comparable of who they, see them similar to?
It's a good question. No, I haven't heard that. And that'd be a very, very interesting question to hear because they're kind of built as someone to play in the outside, but then they're also quick. And like I said, Jaden's playing in the slot. So no, I haven't heard that. That's a really good question.
And then just the other thing I'm really interested to see at the NFL level, just their toughness aspect, like the way they finished their plays was just different than anybody I've ever watched. I mean, they were fighting for every single yard. Now I've seen players do that in the NFL and they get in trouble because players are coming in punching that ball out like crazy. Right. So you got to make sure you got ball security, but I'm interested to see if they can bring that to that next level, if they can still, fight for those extra yards, if they can still keep that as part of their game or not. But yeah, overall, super excited to see what they do in Houston. Cannot wait for the preseason to watch them in action. Any notes on any other Jackrabbits that got drafted? Were you able to talk to any of the other guys or anything you've seen?
I've been waiting for the guys to come back from their camps. I know a lot of them are still working on those and working through those. Haven't talked to any of the other guys. I will, though, because I'll probably stay in touch with those guys over the years. So no other notes as of yet, but that's actually a good idea for a story as far as when those guys come back to find out what their experiences were like.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be really interesting. I'm hopeful that Isaiah Davis catches on just because with running backs in the NFL, it's such a tough position because the NFL just treats them as like a dime a dozen. Like they roll through them like crazy, and some guys just don't get that right opportunity. I'm just so hopeful that he does because I think that dude can eat in the NFL, but just takes the right opportunity.
How do you guys view Zay as far as comparative wise to past South Dakota State running backs?
Well, he's more of a power back, in my opinion. I mean, not just power, but like, I don't know how. I know what I'm trying to say, but I'm not going to say it right. He just runs with such power. I
think he's the most complete package that's ever came from SDSU. Zenner had what he had. He was one cut and gone. Pierre was more of the finesse guy. But just that Isaiah's got that pure, that the strength, the speed, the vision, the patience, the cuts. I mean, he's got literally everything. And he's got the size to do it at the NFL level. And so that's, I think that's a big reason why I'm really, really hopeful that he gets a shot because I really think that he is an NFL back and can produce at that level.
I think when NFL teams get around that kid, their eyes will open. And I'm not just talking about his physical ability, which is NFL level. That they'll see that. But I'm talking about his work ethic. I had a coach tell me a year ago that he is the 1% of the 1% as far as work ethic. And they have to tell him to tone it down. I mean, if you guys saw, I interviewed him after the national championship, and he was crying. And it was not because they won. It was because his time at South Dakota State had come to an end. He was sad about it. He loves football, and he gets to do that now every day. That's his full-time job. That's all he gets to do. And I think he will blow away probably his teammates and also the coaches at his dedication level. And that alone right there will give him a chance. When you see someone like that, you're going to start giving him the benefit of the doubt regardless. And he's got the talent to back it up. I think he's better than people realize because not many people know about him. Not many people saw him. So let's see what he does in the preseason. I'd be very surprised if he wasn't playing in the NFL for years to come.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm hopeful, looking at the Jets, I think there's an opportunity for him to earn that number 2 spot, if not number 3. But yeah, I'm very excited to see him in the preseason. I don't know if you caught our interview with Ryan Olsen, but we talked about there just how good of a fit the Steelers are for Mason McCormick.
Yeah.
I mean, that dude was destined to be a Steeler. Like, they're just going to absolutely love that kid.
Yeah, I know he is, and I'm from Cleveland, and Pittsburgh is our bitter rival. That was the one team I did not want any of the Jackrabbits to go to, but I think he fits there perfectly. That's exactly the kind of style guy that they look for, and he, again, will have to earn his way onto the field. But I had someone ask me about him. I have a couple buddies who are from Pittsburgh, and they had texted me about him after he got drafted, and I told them, once he sees the field, he'll never come off it. Once he gets his opportunity, he's not giving up those reins. So Mason McCormick is another guy. You talk about the 1% of the 1%. This is from Coach Stig himself, who's coached probably thousands of kids over the years. And he told me that Mason McCormick is one of the best leaders he has ever seen. And that is not a sentence that I hear Coach Stig say often at all. And he said that about Mason McCormick. So talk about high character guys. There's a few of them in this draft class from South Dakota State.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like at the NFL level, they really look for guys that can be a leader on the offensive line. You think about some, big names that come from offensive line, and they all have those leadership qualities. And I think he's just that type of guy. Like he fits the mold of like past NFL linemen that have long careers. And so, yeah, I mean, I fully expect him to have a really long NFL career as well.
I know he didn't play center at State, but I know he's definitely capable because the dude's really smart. He was calling the line at State. And I'd just love to see him become like the next Jeff Saturday. That guy that's just always there, has a long career. So that's my hope. I think he has it in him.
Right.
I'm 100% on his team. He's my favorite player. So that's come through.
There's few guys in the country who rose and grew their stock more than he did after the season ended.
Yeah.
The way that he tested, the way that he interviewed. I mean, there were people who thought he might go 6th, 7th, undrafted. He went in the 4th round.
Yeah.
And that is all the work that he did post season. I mean, like his film spoke for itself. And then he took that to another level and showed that everything he did at South Dakota State was the real deal. He was actually that dominant. He was actually that far physically better than who he was lining up against. I don't think anyone changed their life probably more than Mason McCormick in the football world than he did the next couple months after the season leading up to the NFL draft.
Yeah, no doubt. That was so cool to see his rise, his draft stock rise when he was at the Shrine Bowl, and just the work he's putting in there. And yeah, he was a level above any other offensive lineman there. And the Senior Bowl even said it, like we missed on that guy. Like he should have been at the Senior Bowl. So that was cool to see. You mentioned Cleveland. Have you heard anything about Deshaun Gales?
I have not. I'm actually going home soon. I was going to reach out to him. I don't know if I'll be able to get there or see him, but I will reach out to Deshaun. He'll have a chance, and it's kind of cool. He's competing against Miles Harden from South Dakota, who was drafted by Cleveland in the 7th round. So interested to see if Deshaun can catch on. I mentioned it in an article I wrote months back before the start of the 2023 season. I asked an NFL scout who was at practice who he thought the best player was on the Jackrabbit defense. I thought he'd say Adam Bach. I thought there was a chance he might mention Stallbert, and he said Deshaun Gales. So people know what he's capable of. Not great speed, but good speed. Ran a 4.5 at his pro day. A really good tackler as well. And that's going to stick out to people, someone who's not afraid to put his nose in there and make plays. So excited to see if Dyson can catch on in Cleveland. That would be awesome. I'd love that. How about Garrett Greenfield too? Didn't get drafted, which did surprise me a little bit. I don't think this changed a ton, but this could have been the difference between being drafted in the 7th round and going undrafted. He did not bench. He did not bench at his pro day or the NFL draft. He was dealing with an injury. I don't know how much that affected him, but that could have been slightly a different outcome. But he got a pretty good free agent signing deal. And I think he's going to make the roster in Seattle. I do. I think he is someone who is just a football player. Talk about someone who's gotten better over his career. Garrett is someone who is really putting time to his craft. And whether it's the practice squad or the team itself, I think he has a real shot in Seattle. They gave him a pretty decent deal. And, from learning through the Yankees, when someone gives you that kind of money, it's significant money. They've invested something in you. They want to see you develop. So he is someone to keep your eye on as well. And then Isaiah Stallbird. Yeah. I'm not super familiar with the Saints linebacker group right now, but that kid, you talk about an athlete and someone who helped himself at their pro day. He opened eyes with what he did. Ran nearly broke 4.4 in the 40, jumped out of the gym with his vertical, and really put on good weight. And that was cool to see. He used those 2 extra years of eligibility to his advantage in the best way. And you see players put on weight sometimes, and it's almost like they're putting on weight for the sake of weighing more. Now, he put on muscle. He looked good. He looks like a legit linebacker who can play at the next level, can play in space. We know about his quickness. So he's another guy to keep your eye on, and I'm excited to see if he can make a team. And he's a dedicated guy. He's got a young child. He's told me for months that that's part of his motivation to help out his family. So Isaiah Stallbird, another good story for South Dakota State. And right now he's in New Orleans.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what he can do. I think his flexibility will help him a lot at the NFL level. They seem to love those guys that can roll, safety to linebacker to nickel, kind of play those different spots. And I think he has a really good chance of catching on because of that. Back to Greenfield, I think he was underrated at SDSU. And I think it was just because he was so quiet. And then you had Mason there who was loud and, he did what he did. He was the bully, he made the pancake blocks. But Garrett was just so consistent and good. But I think he got kind of overshadowed a little bit. And so it'll be cool to see him shine on his own at Seattle. One way he did shine is jumping higher than any other offensive lineman ever has at the NFL Draft Combine, which is wild. I would have never imagined that he was a good jumper.
Bizarre.
I think it surprised him.
I don't know if he's ever been done an interview about it, but it would be interesting to hear did you expect to jump that high? Or I don't know. It's weird.
I asked him about that at the pro day, and he kind of smiled and laughed, and he said, well, I was doing a lot of explosive work. And then he said adrenaline just kicked in, and it might be the highest he's ever jumped in his life.
Well, it's the best time to have your best jump, let me tell you. Couldn't have been at a better time.
Were you guys surprised he wasn't drafted?
Yeah.
Greenfield, yeah, definitely. And I think we kind of asked Olsen about it, and I think he felt the same way. That he saw some other guys go off the board that he was like, geez, he got drafted before Garrett, and so I was surprised as well.
Can't forget about Heinze though. Got to mention.
I was going to say last but not least, Zach Heinz with the Chargers. I think he's an interesting prospect. I think he's more raw than Goddard or Kraft was that came out. But he's got the size and the hands where I think an NFL team looks at him and says, we can do something with this guy. And he's that prototypical NFL tight end size. I'm excited to see what he can do too.
He'll have to prove it probably blocking first. I think he'll have to be kind of maybe a specialty guy. And then once they see that he's capable of being a good blocker, and then they see the hands, and that will bode well for him as well. Never going to blow anyone away with his athleticism. And he's a good athlete, but he's not Tucker Kraft. And he knows that. So he'll have to prove himself as a blocker, which he's very capable of doing. And from then we'll see. And I think he has a legit shot to also be an NFL player for the years to come. I don't see why he couldn't do it. He's got all the tools necessary to find a niche in the NFL.
I mean, anytime we asked any coach or any other player about him, that's all they could talk about is how soft his hands were and how he catches just pretty much anything. So, yeah, I mean, that being his height, that can be helpful in the end zone too. So,
no question.
So then after the draft comes the time that SDSU fans were sweating for a while, not knowing if Gronowski was coming back or not. He makes his announcement in a cool way by quoting Michael Jordan, and then Tanner comes out with a very, very cool story. Again, excellent. If you haven't gone and read that, go read it. It's a delight for Jacobit fans and FCS fans as a whole, which we're going to talk about. Yeah. But I guess, tell us a little bit about the process of talking with Gronowski about that and how that went.
We had talked about a month before his decision and just talked to him about writing a story on the process of it. And I see Mark quite often, and I try not to ask him too much about it, to be honest. I mean, I think life's about treating others as you'd like to be treated. And it made no difference to me if he went or stayed. Of course, I wanted him to stay at South Dakota State. I don't see why anyone who lives here, who covers the team, who watches FCS football wouldn't have wanted him to stay. Of course, I wanted him to stay, but it makes no difference in the person he is. So I'd be supporting him, whatever he decided to do. And so we would talk here and there throughout the process. And man, that's just another situation where it's pretty cool for me to see how things actually work beneath the surface. And man, there was so much that went into that decision, and what a blessing it was for that kid. He had earned every bit of the notoriety that he has gotten, and the position that he's in is because of what he has done day in and day out for 4 years. He got to a place where he was named the best player in the FCS. He broke through with South Dakota State, getting them to their first championship, did it again, and okay, he's about to graduate, and he's got 2 years of eligibility left, and teams from the top of college football on down would like to have him as their quarterback. How highly does that speak of South Dakota State that he said, I want to stay here? I mean, I tried to make that clear in the article, how impressive, how loudly it says that this place actually is big time. This is a place where you can accomplish anything. Anything that a player seeks to do can happen in Brookings. And when you look at the decision in itself, there's a ton of factors that go into it. But something it made me think. I sent it to a couple of my buddies back at home in Cleveland for them to read. And their reaction right away were, I can't believe he stayed. Why would he stay? And I said, well, you at the surface, when you tell someone, yeah, this kid turned down 6 figures to remain at an FCS school, the initial reaction is why? But then you look into it. Well, one, his main purpose, his main goal for himself, obviously, is to win a national championship with the team. But he had to make a decision for himself in this scenario, and he wants to play in the NFL. That's what he wants to do. And so he has to find a way to give himself the best opportunity. And time again, as he broke things down, South Dakota State was the answer. And that says a ton, as I said, about what the program's become, just as a success standpoint. But a huge reason, and it sounds cliche to say, but it is the truth, is how healthy of a place and an environment it is in Brookings. It's those guys care about each other. The coaching staff cares about the kids. They treat each other well there. I've said that time and time again on this podcast, how I've been treated there from the start. It's a good place to be. And that's important just again as a person. To have a place where people believe in you, they trust in you, and you're going to be of value. I don't care if you're a walk-on or if you're Mark Gronowski. You will find something that will help you moving forward in your life. And of course, there's going to be places like that across the country, but not quite like this. It is different. That's why people stay at this place. And Mark Gronowski is the latest example. And you guys mentioned it. Not only does that say a lot about South Dakota State, but the FCS as well.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting. You touched on his NFL aspirations, and I think that obviously, I think the way that he's played and produced, I think that he's earned that potential, and I'm sure he's hearing that from scouts and things like that. But I wonder how much of seeing the success that Goddard and Kraft are having. And then seeing just how many guys from this class got NFL chances, how much of that has shifted his focus from thinking about, well, potentially playing in the Big Ten, let's say, to, man, I should really focus on the NFL because that's where it's at. And I have a very, very good shot at going there from SDSU. Do you think that played into that at all?
It did. Yeah, it played a role. And I think the quote that I had in the story there that I thought was very cool, and so did Mark, was he had heard from an NFL scout that they view South Dakota State as a bottom Power 4 team or one of the best group of 5 teams. And as Mark said, he's like, that's not someone who's a fan of South Dakota State saying that. That's an NFL scout. That's actually how they view the Jackrabbits. And then the proof's in the pudding. You got 8 guys from a team he just played on are now in an NFL roster where he's trying to get to. So, of course, that played a factor in his decision because it's possible, and it's not even possible. It's almost probable. You can do it at South Dakota State, not even to mention the past year of his teammates. How about a guy he learned under for a whole year, and Chris Oladokin, who came to South Dakota State for one season. He got drafted. He's still in the NFL, and he plays quarterback. So, yeah, that's absolutely a reason why he stayed at South Dakota State.
Yeah, I mean, just I loved that quote that they consider us bottom P4, top G5. It's surreal to hear that.
It is.
I mean, internally, we think that, but like you said, to hear an outsider say that, somebody with as much pull as an NFL scout saying that, it's wild. And to think, and again, I'm glad you're doing the book, just to think about, where this program was, struggling to make the playoffs in D1, and then we start the playoff run and we build and build and build, and then we get to where we are. It's just surreal hearing that's the way that that people from the outside consider the program. Yeah, it's just awesome to hear, and it's cool to be a part of, even with our small part that we play. It's exciting to be a part of it, and I think it should be exciting for all Jackrabbit football fans to know that you're a part of this. Speaking of the fans, the comments that he had as far as hey, if the stands weren't full, this would have been an easier decision, but that makes a big difference. I mean, that is telling. I mean, there are people that they'll say, well, I'm just going to go watch the game at a bar. It doesn't really matter if I'm there or not anyway, or it's more comfortable to watch from home, or all these excuses. But man, when you see a player like Gronowski say that that's one of the reasons why he stayed, geez, that's moving, man.
It was, and it was the truth, and he meant that. I mean, he really, you can't tell over print the emphasis that someone puts always in their voice, but he really meant that. I mean, you guys remember the environment for Montana State this past season?
Yes.
I mean, that was unbelievable. That was fantastic. And the players, they feel that. They feel that, and it does matter. You look at just the quarterbacks that he talked to when trying to figure out what the process would be like entering the transfer portal if he was to do so, from Albany and from Holy Cross.
Yeah.
Those guys get 2,000, 3,000 people in the stands per game. It just wasn't the same decision in any sense of the word. South Dakota State, with their support, is becoming a different beast at this level. And it played a factor into why Mark Gronowski chose to stay.
Yeah, no, it's cool to hear. Yeah, we can take Zach's question here. He says, Tanner, when coming to South Dakota, did you ever think you'd enjoy getting to know SDSU and covering them as much as you do? And also, what's your favorite story about SDSU so far while covering the Jacks?
I appreciate that question, Zach. I didn't know what to think when I got here. I think one of the things I've enjoyed the most, which this obviously as time goes on won't stay the same because it can't, but I'm actually kind of close in age to some of the older guys, especially with them having 6 years. I mean, I'm only 2 years older than the Yankees, so when I got to South Dakota State, they kind of felt more like my peers than anything else. And I was a college athlete myself. I played college basketball, and I just enjoyed being around the guys. And that was the biggest part for me was, look, I moved here from Cleveland, Ohio, so I didn't have, my boys weren't here. And so it kind of, that helped me just naturally being around them anyways for my job. So I didn't know how much I would enjoy it. And I've covered a lot of athletes, but it was just different at South Dakota State. It really was. And if I had to say a favorite story, boy, I've had some ones that I've really enjoyed from the Jackrabbits. Zach Hines comes to mind with his siblings. That was a cool one.
Yeah.
One of my favorite one is the Yankees because that's how we met. I mean, we literally met. I'm sitting down to interview these guys, and they're cracking me up, and we became friends literally from that interview. So that's one of my favorites. Randy Camone was a cool one I did the other year to see what he's came from, his journey. I don't know. There's been a lot. I actually did a story on Pierre Strong that I could never release that I love. That one was awesome. I drove down to Arkansas for that story. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you which one was my favorite. I'm sure there's one I'm not thinking of. But I can tell you, whether it's been with South Dakota State or any of the high school athletes I've done. I've even done a couple USD stories. I did a couple USD basketball stories when I was working for Kellerland. I just enjoy it. It's nice to try and put myself in their shoes and remember what it was like being an athlete when someone would come and ask you about the team or anything. And I always try and whatever I'm writing, to the best of my ability, I try and make sure that person will be proud of what others are seeing of them. And it's something that they can show their kids or their family, their cousins. And so I enjoy what I do a lot. And I feel so blessed and so lucky that of all the places my career could have started, that the Lord brought me to South Dakota. So I can't tell you a specific story, but I can tell you that I feel honored to get to tell some of these young men's lives and what they do every day.
Tanner, you were just talking about family, and I know you've talked to Ray. How cool are the Gronowskis? They're such down-to-earth, awesome people. Deb, Ryan, Ray. They're some of our favorite people to talk to at tailgating. We're always having a good time with them. They're just so awesome and genuine.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've had a lot of interactions. Maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up because I had a cool. I thought this stood out to me. This was probably 3 months ago. I was with Mark, and I mean, usually when you're talking to someone as a friend, you just talk about what you're going through. But I didn't want to dive into too much of it because he heard it from so many other people. And so one of the questions I asked him, I said, what are your parents telling you through all this? And he started laughing a little bit, and he goes, they just won't tell me that much. And I said, what do you mean? He's like, well, they just they just say they'll support me, whatever I do. I was like, really? He said, yeah. I thought that was the coolest thing to see. How many parents do we see in today's age that are pushing their kids to my kid's worth this, and they're so deeply involved in, for lack of a better term, maybe living through them and applying unneeded pressure, and are maybe trying to make a dollar or a buck off their son, whatever the case is. Not them. They just good people, and were right there with him for whatever he chose to do, including Catherine, his girlfriend,
Yeah,
who
she's awesome too.
was right there with him too throughout the entire process. And I thought that was really cool to hear. This kid who is getting so many different opinions. People were talking about it on shows. People were talking about it at the bar. He should do this. He should do that. And his own two parents were just saying, "It's up to you. We'll help you. We'll help you with your decision. We'll help you research whatever you want to do. But the decision is on you, Mark, and we're with you whatever you decide to do." I thought that was the coolest thing.
Yeah, no, that family is amazing. They're all amazing people. We love hanging out with them. It's so cool that he ended up here. I feel like that the family almost like they feel like South Dakotans. Like they feel like they belong here.
Yeah.
And I feel like it seems like they feel at home around the people that support SDSU. So that's really cool to see.
I wanted to say, could I say one last thing
Yeah,
about
go for it.
the Mark situation? And I thought this was really something. I didn't add it in the article, but I did mention that this will be Mark's last season at South Dakota State. He has full plans to enter the draft. That's what he's aiming at. He wants to enter the draft, but this will be, regardless, his final season at South Dakota State. I don't think he'll transfer. He doesn't want to. That's just if for some reason the scouts say, "Look, man, we haven't seen enough, and you got to show us more." And the only reason why he wouldn't come back to South, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why this is his last year no matter what, is because of Chase Mason.
Yep.
They're friends. They care about each other. And he's told them, like, this will be my last year, and then it's yours to take over next season. Let's not forget about John Bell as well. He's made progress, and I think he will affect this program in a positive way. But it does look like Chase is the next guy up. And Marcus told him that this will be my last year at South Dakota State, has full plans to have a great year and enter the NFL draft, and then it will be Chase Mason's turn to take over next year. And I thought that was really cool that he's thinking of others too within his decision, and that just goes to show you, again, that there's closeness within this program. Are those guys competitive with each other? Absolutely. But they care about each other too, and that's a big reason why that the program keeps going up.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully people can respect that. That's really cool that he's considering that, and that that he's making it known. So hopefully people aren't shouting one more year at the podium
Right.
as their next year. It'll be "Thank you, Mark" instead.
Yeah.
We'll try to lead that. One last thing on that article that I thought was really cool was how scouts were talking about how they would rather see them play at the level he's at and produce at that level than go somewhere else and potentially sit, or I think the other kind of implication was either sit or be on a not as successful team, because I mean, you think about, take Northwestern for example. I don't know how they're going to be this year, but I know how they looked last year. Whether how well would they have protected him on the line? How would he have got his chance to shine as much on a team like that, or on any other team he could have gone to? What kind of situation are you getting yourself into, and are you going to be able to display your skills as much as you would be able to here, knowing what he's got coming back?
Yeah, it's a good point, and that definitely played into his decision. Leaving opened so many question marks, and it wasn't necessary, right? I mean, I think another cool part of this too is that with all of those guys exiting for the next level, okay, you do know you have a good offensive line coming back, got some question marks. You do know you have some good playmakers surround you, but they're not established guys. Well, Mark now has an opportunity to showcase more of what he can do. He's going to be asked to do more. I mean, of course, they're going to run the ball, no question. But he is going to have to do more for this team to succeed. And that's what he wants, right? I mean, he is fully capable of it, and they're going to open up the playbook for him. Like, he is in a position that is so ideal in so many different ways. He had the quote about how the grass could not be greener at South Dakota State. I mean, they're
That's
basically
awesome.
going to hand him the keys to the car, and it's his. He can drive it where he wishes to. He's going to have a lot of say in the offense because he's a great football mind, and they know that there's a camaraderie within the coaching staff and Mark that you're just not going to get anywhere else. Even at Northwestern with Lujan, which would have been a cool reunion, that's still the only guy there that knows you well. At South Dakota State, he just has so much trust built up that it's a great situation. And then, as we just talked about, he's going to have to do more. And he does have to get better. He's had a great career, but he does have to get better. There's things he has to improve upon, and he'll be given the opportunities to do that. As you mentioned, Ben, if you go somewhere else, you don't even know if you're going to see the field. There's just so many question marks that come into play if you are to transfer. And when you have a spot like South Dakota State where it's proven that you can get to the next level if you perform well, he's going to have that opportunity. Great schedule. First game against Oklahoma State. I'm sure you guys are super excited about. What a game that is to put yourself on the map. Everything's laid out in front of him. I thought it was an awesome decision and a very, very well thought out decision as well.
For sure. And I mean, it's cool from a Mark perspective, obviously, and it's cool for SDSU fans for this year, but the long-term implications too of hearing Mark say these things, hearing NFL scouts say these things, seeing all the Jackrabbits go to the NFL. I mean, and just showing that, hey, you can stay here and build yourself and develop yourself and still go where you want to go. You don't have to jump ship and try to go to play for some, P4 team. It's just the long-term implications are huge, I think. And that's, I was obviously excited because with your article because of Mark, but I was also excited because of those long-term implications and what it can mean and will mean for the SDSU football program.
And really, at this point, it's becoming a theme, right? We got Mark, we got Tucker, and then we got Sloan in wrestling, turning down to stay for the culture and the programs that are building. And the more guys that do that and the more that they have success further down the line, I mean, it just goes on and kind of builds on itself and becomes a bit of a snowball of, well, yeah, I can maybe make $100,000 for my last year, or, I can stay who bought in on me when nobody else did before. I can help my teammates, the guys I love that are my family, and still accomplish the same goals because, like you were saying, you can be an also-ran at a Big Ten, potentially start maybe, or you can be the all-star here and be able to showcase your talents. And in this case, show that it wasn't necessarily the players around you that were so good, that it was, you as well. You just didn't have to push yourself to be the it guy because you had, the running backs, the line, the talent and the wide receivers and tight end. Yeah.
Last thing I'll say, Isaiah and Mason turned down. They could have gone other places and gotten paid. Well, how's that turning out right now as far as dollars go? I think they're doing okay with their decision.
For sure. 2 quick questions to end because I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do have a couple that I think would be interesting to hear your answer. Number 1, what storylines surrounding the team are you most excited to follow this year?
Definitely the quarterback. I'd like to see what Mark does this season with adding more to him. Honestly, I'd say off the top of my head, I want to see how Bach responds this season. He's obviously had a great career, but he hasn't stayed healthy. I want to see if he can stay healthy, what that kid can do. He is a special leader. Seeing it up close in person in practice, that guy is intense, and he is intent with what he does. I want to see what Adam Bach can do with the defense that will have to do a little bit of retooling. They've got plenty of pieces back, there's no question, but some guys will have to step up. But Adam Bach is the leader. He's back. How good can that defense be coming off of an historically good season? They were dominant. Got some guys to replace. We know Mark's the leader on offense. It's Adam Bach's team on defense. That would be my favorite storyline coming into the season. And for the second piece, honestly, it's that first game against Oklahoma State. We haven't seen them play an FBS team in 2 years. I am so excited to see how they compete against Oklahoma State in Stillwater, August 31st. I haven't seen a spread on that game yet. I'd imagine it'll probably be somewhere around maybe 11, 12 points. They're going to be underdogs, but I want to see how South Dakota State can stack up against a Power 4 school.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited for that game too. My only concern is just, the new coaches, or at least new roles for some coaches, players filling new roles for the first time. It'll be interesting to see if they can put it all together right away, which is a very difficult thing to do, and it's your first game out of the gates. Lastly, and I know this will be tough to keep it short, and maybe we'll have to schedule.
We haven't even got to the lawsuit or anything. I forgot about.
No, we didn't.
Yeah, that's what I was.
I have one more too.
We may have to schedule a future podcast, but what is your prediction for the SDSU football program going into the future, and along with kind of what do you see happening with the FBS split and where SDSU is going to fall and all that?
I've been thinking this for years, and I think I'm not the first. I think it's inevitable that there will be a split. There will be 3 levels of Division I football, and South Dakota State would like to be in the second tier. I would like to say this because I've heard this theory, and I just would like to address this real quick. I've several times heard people talk about whether it's North Dakota State, South Dakota State, even the Montana schools will not be invited into that second tier of Division I football when the split comes. When the Big Ten expanded, let's just use the Big Ten as an example. Who did they go after? USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon, the 4 biggest brands from that conference. An argument I've heard is, well, why would the group of 5 teams want South Dakota State and North Dakota State to come in because those guys can win it? Yeah, they could win it. You're going to improve your entire trajectory by inviting those teams in. Now, I know right now there's no openings with the conferences, and things will have to change. But I promise you, South Dakota State will not be left out. They are a damn good program. Anyone who is – it blows my mind that people are truly thinking this. You think they're gonna keep them out? No, you want to compete against the best teams. They will raise that level of football if you invite the Dakotas in. It's a whole new region of football with the Montana schools as well. That to me is just ridiculous to think that, oh my gosh, Missouri State they're getting in before the door's going to close. I highly doubt that will happen.
Yeah, and I think if you look at, you talk about building that, whatever that level's brand is, it's when they look at the amount of following that, whether it's SDSU, NDSU has, the attendance numbers that we have. I mean, compare those levels to other G5 teams. It's right. Not even close on some of them. And so, yeah, to think that we'll get left out, I think is a silly conjecture. But I'm interested to see what happens. And but yeah, we'll discuss further on a future podcast. But or maybe with some more dominoes fall and we actually have something to discuss. But Chad, I'll let you close. What do you got?
Yeah, my last quick hitter is, who do you see as the breakout player this year? Maybe not someone that is completely an unknown, but someone that's gonna be the next star, so to speak. Who do you peg?
Well, man, that is a good question because there's going to be several guys who can fit that mold. I want to tell you, give me a week to go to practice in spring ball and let me decide on that. because there's so many guys who you see in practice and you go, man, that guy's got a little something to him, but he just doesn't see the field as much. Well, there's going to be a whole new, there's not just going to be new starters, but then the guys who are in the second and third rotations are also going to be seeing time as well. Man, I want to, can I think on that?
Yeah, you can put it in an article or something. That's fine.
Do you have someone that comes to mind?
Do I? Well, Chris Howard thinks Griffin frickin' Wilde, but I think he's already there.
Yeah, I don't know if that counts.
That's not a breakout player.
No,
I don't think that's a breakout player.
No. I respect your reservation of waiting. I respect your reservation of waiting until the practices, but I do want to know, like, first blush off the cuff, like, who is the first name that comes to your mind of, like, a guy that could pop off this year, and then we'll revisit it and see if it's the same.
Okay, I'll tell you a guy who I think could be someone who people go, whoa, I didn't see this coming. Defensive end, got a great build to him. I think he's a heck of an athlete. Zach Wilson. I like that kid's game. I think he has another level to get to, and I think he has a chance to make it happen.
I like it.
All right. I like it too.
I could argue that he's already proved a little bit, but
no, you're right. He's not totally off the. He's shown a little bit, but I think he's going to become a star. I think he has that potential.
Yeah. Cool.
Caleb Sanders type star. Yeah.
For sure. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tanner. We really appreciate the time. We love having you on. As I mentioned multiple times, and as we talk about on our Twitter all the time, go read Tanner's articles. I think anybody that reads it loves the way that you do things, loves the way that you cover SDSU football. We hope you continue doing it. And again, just thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. You guys have been great to me. Tell you that all the time, and I mean that. You guys have helped me with my career, so I appreciate you guys.
Oh, you bring a lot to the table. We love having you. So
thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time. As we always say, go big, go blue,
go Jack.